I think the learning that I got was working collaboratively with creative people, with designers, with writers, with art directors and photographers, illustrators, and again, bringing sort of a different perspective, but really respecting what they did. I got a lot of joy from that. What I realized was not that they were my people, but that's where their creativity fueled mine, if that makes sense. So I brought a business perspective to their creativity, and that felt really good.
Podcasting from Boulder, Colorado. This is the Baby Got Backstory podcast, where we dive into the story behind the story of today's most inspiring storytellers, creators, and entrepreneurs. I like big backstories, and I cannot lie. I am your host, Mark Gutman. I'm Mark Gutman, and on today's episode of Baby Got Backstory, we are talking with Shawn Parr of the design and innovation consultancy, Bulldog, Drummond. And while I have your ear, if you're listening, I'm assuming you like our show. And if that's the case, please take a minute or two to rate and review us over at Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Apple and Spotify use these ratings as part of the algorithm that determines ratings on their charts. Better yet, please recommend this show to at least one friend you think will like it. That's what really good friends do. And if this is your first time listening, please consider subscribing. It's your subscriptions that make the show possible. All right, back to our show. As the governor, you like that kind of weird British accent that I just failed miserably at, and CEO of Bulldog Drummond, Shawn is responsible for strategically directing each of Bulldog's key engagements, ensuring there's an uncommon sense methodology at the center of everything the company does. This approach maintains that the most complex challenges can be solved and the biggest opportunities can be realized by using a powerful combination of simplicity, common sense, and determination. He brings 20 plus years of innovation, design, brand, and business building experience to companies from Fortune 500s to purpose-driven startups. Shawn helps leadership teams transform large multinational companies, and passionate entrepreneurs launch new companies, products, and brands. He has worked with executive teams at companies including Adidas, Bolt House Farms, Campbell's, CMT, Diageo, Hilton, Heineken, H&R Block, IDEO, MTV, Mattel, Nike, Perch, Starbucks, Samsung, Tata Harper, Taco Bell, WD-40, Westfield, and World Vision, among many others. Those of you listening, do you recognize any of those brands? Wow. He writes for Fast Company, PSFK, and is a sought-after speaker. Shawn lives in San Diego with his wife and 3 children, is a Dawn Patrol surfer, wannabe photographer, and avid cultural voyeur. And this is his story. I am here with Shawn Parr, who is the governor and CEO of Bulldog Drummond. Shawn, thank you for joining us. And Shawn, if you wouldn't mind just by starting off by letting us know, what is Bulldog Drummond and what does the governor do?
Mark, nice to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to chat. Bulldog Drummond is a design and innovation company. We're based in San Diego, and we get up every day to help leaders unlock the best in their organization, solve a series of challenges, unlocking opportunities through the lens of brand. And the governor is a title that I inherited a few years ago. It's an English title for a leader, and it stuck. So I'm the CEO, Chief Strategy Officer of the company. Been on the journey for about 23 years here.
Just a mere 23 years. And I like that. And when you talk about being a design and innovation company, if you could just clarify that, because I think a lot of people associate the word design with pretty pictures, imagery, logos. And I have a hunch, and we don't know each other that well, but I have a hunch that you mean something a little bit different when you say design and innovation company. What is that?
Yeah, so for us, design is a way of looking at the world to solve challenges and problems, to create value. So thinking through the lens of designing solutions. And sometimes it can be a strategy, sometimes it can be a service, sometimes it can be a visual manifestation, it can be a logo, it can be an identity, it can be a look and a feel. But yeah, it's an orientation towards solving challenges.
Well, thanks. And in preparation for this interview, I was very curious as to what was Bulldog Drummond. And when I Google it, I get it's a fictional character created by H.C. McNeil, which I've never heard of. And I'm an English person, English literature person, and love to read and think of myself a bit as, a well-read individual, but I've never heard of this book. And so is this the inspiration for the name of your firm?
Yeah, so I got here from London in 1991 and launched Bulldog Drummond in 97. And I wanted to build a brand. I wanted to create a platform that gave us permission to do certain things. And there were two names that I'd sort of come to the US with. One was Bulldog Drummond. The other was Mad Dogs and Englishmen. Mad Dogs and Englishmen was taken. And Bulldog Drummond was a fictional detective. I was given the book as a kid, and they were terrible books. There's a reason you didn't read them. There's a reason nobody studies them, because they're terrible. But he was like, an ugly James Bond, and he solved problems. So really the inspiration was that he was a detective. He solved problems, and that was sort of at the center of who Bulldog Drummond was, in 97 and is today. We're in the business of being given a challenge. We solve a problem. We come to the table with a level of energy, personality, and sense of ourselves. And back in 97, it was a license to behave badly. And today it is truly a brand that lives in a meaningful, deep way.
And so you touched on this a little bit, but you mentioned, I think you got the books when you were, younger, a young boy, and you were first exposed to them. So did you grow up in the UK?
I did.
Yeah. And so as a young boy in the UK, what was Shawn like? Were you into these things like brand and discovering, identity and designing the way forward? Was that who you were as a young boy?
No, yes, in that I was, fascinated by music. I was fascinated by fashion and personal identity. I was trying to figure out, was I a mod? Was I a modern romantic? I didn't see myself as a punk rocker. I loved the aesthetic of the mod movement. I loved that type of music. I loved the liberation of, new romantic music. So I was fascinated by design and culture as a teenager. My father was a very creative individual. He owned a produce store. He owned a pub. He owned an antique store. He owned an import business. And he was extremely creative with merchandising and customer service in a very unique way. So that's where I suppose my exposure to design and aesthetic came from: interior design, retail design, but not in a sort of a formal way.
Yeah. And so were you exposed to any of that kind of design in school, or was it purely through your father and, exposure to his entrepreneurial businesses? Did you take on any sort of art or creative interest while you were at school?
Art was a subject, but it wasn't a total fascination. And so for me, the thing that I was fascinated by was literature, writing, debate. The Literary Debating Society was something I was stoked on. So no, not in a formal way. I think when you look back at the influences you have, I definitely look back on the way he represented his store, the music he put on, the way that he was involved with, charities. So it was sort of, I don't know, design school of life, if you like.
Yeah. And so why was that path not for you? Why? Or maybe you did, but I'm assuming you didn't get into the family business. You didn't go that path. Why not?
Well, I used to get up at 4 o'clock in the mornings as a teenager on the weekends and go to Covent Garden with him to buy vegetables and to load the van, unload the van, and set the store up. As I got a little bit older, I worked around the pub in the background. I went to antique markets. And, again, I learned a lot from him, but, for a couple of different reasons, didn't get involved in the family business. It wrecked his marriage and didn't make him a particularly happy man. It was hard work in a different way than, modern hard work is, if that makes sense.
No, for sure. And so I imagine that you had probably set that worldview or that opinion of where you wanted to be, which was not in that business, by the time that you were in high school. And so what did you think you wanted to do with your life at that point? What were you thinking the future was going to hold for Shawn, when you're getting ready to prepare to go out in the rest of the world?
I actually thought that I wanted to be an officer in the English Army. And I was sorely rejected with that one because my grades were not strong enough in the sciences, and so there was a period of time where I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. And at one point I thought I wanted to be an accountant. So I was in that little chapter of sort of searching for perhaps where I could add value or where I could be inspired or whatever. And it took a little while to figure that out.
Yeah. And so what was that like? I mean, sounds like you might have been heartbroken to be rejected by the English Army and realize that wouldn't be for you. So, what was that process like of figuring out, what was your muse or what was your calling?
As I look back, it was very frustrating not to know exactly what you wanted to do. It made you pick up things and turn them over and try them. And, I think a little rejection is good. It shapes your character. It moves you in a different direction. If I go back then and imagine like what I'm doing now, what I've had the privilege of doing for the last 20 plus years, I could never have imagined that's what I want. That's what I would be doing. So I think there's, we talk about, hey, you design a path and you just follow it. Some people are lucky to do that. Some people they just have that burning passion. I think my path has been early on trying a lot of things. And then, by luck and by relationship and by, sheer will at times, getting on a path that I absolutely love.
Yeah. And so how old were you when you were in this stage of experimentation, and what were some of the things that you tried that you realized weren't for you?
So I was in my early 20s. I thought I wanted to be an accountant. I actually worked it was probably the precursor to David Brent's office. I worked for a tower crane and construction plant hire business, and I worked with an incredible guy who was just very organized, and he ran all of the tower cranes that were rented out through London. But he was in finance, and everybody that was in finance in this organization they had responsibility. They had influence. They had what looked like an interesting existence. So I thought, okay, I'm going to be an accountant, and I can go down that path. And started down that path, and wasn't for me.
And so when you realized it wasn't for you, then what'd you do?
So there was a fantastic company that was in the real estate and finance space. And it was a brand. It stood out. It had a level of consistency and uniformity and service. And they had a sales position. And I applied for it, got the job, and very, very quickly moved into a sales director position, sales and marketing director position, running a team. It was a sort of a pretty rapid path to responsibility. And that was the sort of the beginning of connecting the dots back to design. And at the time, I didn't think of it as brand. I didn't call it brand. I didn't call it strategy. I didn't call it design or customer experience. It was just being part of something that was cohesive and different and had energy, and it was youthful, and it was successful, and it was making a difference in people's lives. So that led me to a situation where I was responsible for our ad agency and was the client, and had a great relationship with them. And so they, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months into our relationship, said, we want to grow our business. We'd love to offer you an opportunity to come join us. So I moved from technically being a client, a young client, into running an ad agency with the responsibility of growing it. And that sort of was the beginning of that sort of formal transition into advertising, design, innovation, consulting.
Yeah. And so it sounds like to this point, other than learning on the job with your father and learning on the job with the real estate company, you haven't had any real formal education around brand, advertising, any of these things. You're learning on the job. So you go and you take this larger role at an advertising agency. I mean, what was that like? I mean, were you well suited for that? Did you just struggle at first? Like, what was that experience like?
So I think I brought a lot of perspective where I had been the client. So almost having a client inside of this agency, these team of people that had been pure agency people. It was a design studio, a production studio, a media buying team. So I had a different perspective, and I really respected their different perspective and approach. So I think we learned together. And I think that was a good example of, different areas of expertise or experience coming together can actually be better. And it was the thing that I was schooled in the prior projects works responsibilities were juggling many expectations, many projects, many deadlines, many complexities. So I think that piece was easy, if you like, or wasn't complicated. I think the learning that I got was working collaboratively with creative people, with designers, with writers, with art directors and photographers, illustrators, and again, bringing sort of a different perspective, but really respecting what they did. And I got a lot of joy from that. What I realized was not that they were my people, but that's where their creativity fueled mine, if that makes sense. So I brought a business perspective to their creativity, and that felt really good.
Yeah. And is this where kind of that light bulb, that proverbial light bulb goes off, where you're like, maybe I found it. Maybe I found the thing that I'm supposed to be settling into? Was this the time?
Yeah, I think that to some degree, yes, the ability to build and create and add value. But I think that didn't really come until I got to California. There was still the UK or London, while it was dynamic, still had sort of this, rather than, yes, you can, it had this, well, maybe you can. And when I got, oh, I'm sorry, no, I don't think you should do that. Maybe don't, maybe not. I'm sorry, no. That's not possible. Whereas I got to California, it was like, wow, everybody's got this energy about them, this just this optimism, there's nothing you can't do. It's full of possibilities. So it was coming here that just gave me that sense of, oh my gosh. And, I think with the rise of the design movement, if you like, the rise of entrepreneurialism here with the advent of, the web, I realized I was like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah. And so what brought you to California? So you're in the UK and coming here is, it's not like it's impossible or anything, but it is different and it is a big move. And, what took you from London to California?
So I met a California girl who was at school in London, just about to graduate, fell in love, basically told her wherever she went, I would go. And it just so happens that she was from San Diego, and that's not a bad place to live. But so, yeah, fell madly in love. I've been married to her for 30 years next year. We've got 3 kids. So I didn't come here for business. I didn't come here for, what America offers. It's like love.
That's a good reason. Probably the best of all. And congratulations on 30 years and 3 kids. That's quite an accomplishment. Yeah, that's amazing. And so, you come here and, I used to live in Los Angeles and kind of know that whole California area really well. And I still don't even think of San Diego as like an advertising kind of hotspot. I know there is a big economy there. I know there's a lot of people, but, I think if you're coming to the US for advertising, you're looking at, New York, Miami, Los Angeles, all these bigger metro areas. And so what was it like when you got to San Diego where, you have this experience, and did you show up with your portfolio and your briefcase ready to tackle the advertising world in San Diego? What was that all about?
Yeah, no, it was very humbling. Back in, 91, it was, it was a city that was revolved around hospitality, the military, and there were other businesses here. But once you sort of looked around, you're right, it was sort of the hotbed of creativity back then. There are a couple of really great ad agencies here. There are a couple of great, really design studios here. And I think what's happened is, as San Diego as a city has grown up over the last 20 plus years, the level of entrepreneurial energy and creativity that manifests itself in food, hospitality, technology, healthcare, biotechnology, the hotbed of creativity has fueled a community of amazing design-centric companies here. And, I was fortunate to be here when it was, early in that sort of gestation period. And I've just been incredibly privileged to live here and, do business here. But at the same time, our business has been very much across the US and, outside of the US over the last, 20 plus years. So we chose to look outside of San Diego. We needed to look outside of San Diego for business. And that was actually a really good challenge on reflection.
This episode brought to you by Wild Story. Wait, isn't that your company? It is. And without the generous support of Wild Story, this show would not be possible. A brand isn't a logo or a tagline or even your product. A brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or company. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. Wild Story helps progressive founders and savvy marketers build purpose-driven brands that connect their business goals with the customers they want to serve so that both the business and the customer needs are met. This results in crazy, happy, loyal customers that purchase again and again, and this is great for business. If that sounds like something you and your team might want to learn more about, reach out at www.wildstory.com and we'd be happy to tell you more. Now back to our show. When you came to San Diego, did you start Bulldog Drummond like day one? Were you looking for a job within the advertising community, or what were your job prospects like when you came here full of love and hope?
So I actually got a visa and a job with a little design studio, and the owner of that business was thrilled that I had business development and could build a business, and I was English. 2 days in, realized it was not going to work, and started to think about, okay, do I start something on my own? That was incredibly difficult back then. And I was very fortunate. My wife's best friend from elementary school, her mother owned a little design business, design and PR business with a friend, and they had a good reputation. They had a little portfolio and a little office. And I got introduced to them, and I said, "Hey, listen, give me a desk, a chair, and a phone, and give me a little bit of time, and let me see if I can develop some business, and then maybe we can have a conversation." And within about 6 months, I brought in some business, and at the end of the year, we figured out, hey, this was going to be a good thing. And so that was the incredible sort of jumping off point where I was able to, really honor them, and at the same time be able to build sort of a business infrastructure. So that was in sort of late 92. I spent about 3 or 4 years building up a team and a portfolio, and then launched Bulldog Drummond formally in 97. So, the power of, or the benefit of, being supported by or encouraged by a good person, I was very fortunate that was the case.
Yeah. Who was that person? What was their name?
Her name was Anne, or is Anne Burke. And she's an incredibly wise Irish-American New Yorker with 8 Burkes. And my wife actually grew up with their family, and they're incredible people. And, eternally grateful to Anne. And yeah, no, I was very fortunate. She was fortunate, and I was fortunate.
Yeah. And so you go off and you hang your shingle and you launch this firm, Bulldog Drummond. And what did you hope to do with it? Why did you start your own firm, and what were you looking to do?
I think first and foremost, provide a life for my wife and family. Provide a great life for my wife and family is goal number one today. That hasn't changed. But I think to work with interesting people, and it was to, at the time, it was to create great advertising. It was to design great, visual solutions for people. Today, it's a different thing.
Yeah. And so when you went into business, did you have a strong sense of like who you were going to serve? Did you know what market you were going to be looking at? Or was it more of a like, hey, we're just out here and we're hungry and we're taking business from anybody?
I think to start with, it was certainly that, to get going. And it was literally getting going with nothing. And then it became, let's work in sport, let's work in fashion, let's work in entertainment, let's work in, healthcare, to start with, to build a creative reputation. And, early on, it was very much about the dynamic nature of the work that you created built your reputation. So it was early on, it was how you do that and what type of clients do you do it with. And we were very fortunate. We won some great early business. Virgin was a key client of ours for about 10 years. And, it was really sort of a magnet both for talent, and it was a tool to actually demonstrate our creativity as we were growing.
Yeah, and that must have been extremely exciting, and what a great brand to work with. And as you started, I mean, was it a success from day one, or were you kind of holding it all together? Were you worried, at any given time that, hey, this thing might not work? And you just shared with me the number one driver for that business was to take care of your family. So those are some big stakes. Those are real stakes. This isn't like, ego and stuff like that, whatever, but like your family's at stake here. And so were you ever concerned like, hey, like this thing might not work, or I hope it works, or like, where were you on that?
I think there's always a sort of this driving question of, are you going to be in business? Are you going to be successful? I think the type of any service business is like having a bucket with a hole in, and you're constantly filling it up because you're not selling products per se that people are buying. But I would say that anxiety, if you like, was what certainly drove my energy to keep moving the business forward. And, I've sort of always operated from the premise of, you're not entitled. People don't give you anything. You have to earn respect. You have to earn your way. And it's tough. So it's been a great journey, but all along the way, that fuel of, hey, I have a payroll to make. Beyond my family, I have a business family that I'm responsible for. So that certainly motivates you, for sure.
Absolutely. And, I'm going to make an assumption. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but like, I get the sense that you really love what you do, and you really love this field of design and brand. And so, assuming that to be true, and what do you love about it? Why you've been in it for a long time. You've been, you've been in it by choice. Like, what do you love? What do you love about it?
So I think coming from a country where, there was always this, going back to what I was saying earlier, to come to a country and be in a profession where anything's possible and you can play a role in working with entrepreneurs, or you can work with the leaders of multi-billion-dollar international companies, and you can help add value, move things forward through the power of design and communication and collaboration. It really does. It never gets old, because if you're fascinated by the challenge and you're fascinated by the people you work with, they are always different. There's similarities, but the marketplace is different. The customers are different. The stage of business is different. The stage of technology is different. The personalities are different. The cultural challenges inside of a company. So it's always different. And I have terrible ADD and, sort of have this serial entrepreneurial, want to solve, want to create, want to fix. And so it feeds that sort of incessant need to jump into things and create. And then there's the fascination with beauty expressed in designing solutions and, improving lives and helping in small ways to make the world a better place. So I think there's no better place for somebody that's got a little ADD, it's got that energy for creating things. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, I always describe it a little bit as like this, ability to always have new love. You can always fall in love again and again with a different, leadership team, brand, idea. Like you get to just and you just get to kind of redo that over and over again. And I really resonate with what you're saying. And so when you talk about brand, like how do you define brand? Like what's your definition of brand?
So I think it's multidimensional, and in its most simplest form, it used to mean it was a promise. It is the manifestation of a broad series of things that sort of end up in a consumer's mind in terms of the way they think about a product, a company, or a service. But I think one simple way that I like to think about brand is a brand is like a person. And, a person is like a brand, meaning we're searching for a reason why we exist. We have a purpose in the world. We go out and live into that purpose. We have a personality that is distinct. We have a set of values that guide how we think about things and how we operate. And then we have relationships with people that, we're either in positive, negative, or non-relationship with. And I think brands are very similar. They have a strategic or a dimensional core to them. They have a human characteristic. This is at least one way of thinking about it from my perspective. It's like, why does it exist? What does it go do in the world? What value is it adding? How does it show up? How do people experience it? How does it live in their lives? So I think brand is an incredible asset that when understood and when defined and unlocked, actually we see it transform companies and teams. They believe in it. They get behind it. They come to work every day because they really are invested and engaged in it, in a relationship with it. And the same is true with consumers.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And everyone loves transformation and engagement. But what's hard about it? Like, what don't we know about this thing brand? Like if, I mean, I'm sure we'd all be doing it. Every business would be doing it well if they could. So what's hard about it?
I think that inside of organizations, you have different levels of awareness and understanding of all the disciplines, whether it's finance, whether it's law, whether it's regulation for manufacturing, or whether it's for marketing, or whether it's for brand. And depending on the people that are stewarding an organization, the appreciation for what an incredibly well-articulated, framed out, executed brand looks like can be challenging. So I think part of our job is always to try to recognize the level of awareness and understanding and be a good guide to help the teams understand what it can do for their organization and their constituents. I think it's hard when it's viewed superficially, but I think the level of understanding has, in the last 2 or 3 years, is people are very much aware of what it can do for a business.
Yeah, we're kind of in the golden age or golden era, if you will. It's like people are finally hearing and understanding what it is and what it isn't. And so, as you were talking, I was thinking about how you started this interview and talking about, Bulldog Drummond's been around for 23 years. You've been doing this for a long time. And it got me to thinking about just like relevancy and staying relevant. And like, how does, like that's something that always just like is on the top of my mind is like, how do you continue to stay relevant? How do you continue to reinvent yourself? And so how does Bulldog Drummond do it? How do you, stay relevant and kind of keep on the pulse of what's going on?
You calling me old?
Not at all. Not at all.
No, it's a fantastic question, because I think back to brand, you have to be relevant. And I think the world that we live in today, it's not that brands have to be relevant, but you have to be current. You have to be engaged in culture. You have to be engaged in the world that's around you. And I think back to your question about why I still love what I do. We as a company, we are forced to be relevant and curious and students of what is now. We are also challenged with our clients to solve big business challenges. And so in doing that, you learn. In doing that, you're collaborating with team members inside of organizations and your own, so that you're always learning. You're always sort of moving forward. So I think that plus being self-aware and not getting, so caught up in, hey, we're good, but versus we've always got something to learn. And I think that sort of humility actually makes us like watch where we are in the zeitgeist. It makes us look at where we are in the flow of business.
Yeah. And so as you think back across that body of work that you alluded to, I won't make you pick an absolute favorite, but what's a piece of work that you're really, really proud of that, you look back and you're like, it's kind of like the full expression of Shawn Parr and his team?
I think there's two for me. One is I was fortunate to go to Africa in 2006, and the trip was to understand the impact of hunger and the impact of HIV. And we came back and we had a project that was literally, how do you represent the impact of HIV on a continent and various constituents on that continent? And we were able to develop the concept for a traveling exhibit that was inspired by a trip to the Apartheid Museum. And it was highly experiential, where you would walk through listen to the lives of different people who contracted or didn't contract HIV/AIDS. And that raised awareness, understanding, and a significant amount of money. So that was a project I think made me think about the type of work we do in a meaningful way. That trip made me think about the role that we play, because we transitioned from being an ad agency into a design and innovation consulting business as a result of sort of that trip and our work with Virgin, which was a real interesting mashup of sort of forces that made me think about where we were going. And then I would say the second piece of work is we helped to we founded a business called the U School, which is a social and emotional learning platform that is very much about helping high school kids, college kids, people in transition figure out where they're going. So it's a construct of self-awareness with self-confidence, leading to self-direction in very simple terms. But it's a curriculum-based platform. So putting all the learning that we'd had from a business perspective, from a family life perspective, into a product. So yeah, there are two that come to mind.
Yeah, those are amazing. But flipping the script a little bit, is there one that broke your heart? Like, is there one that you can remember where it just didn't pan out the way you wanted it to, or it just left you kind of sad and bummed out?
I've been so fortunate across all the years. And I wouldn't say there was any one that left me sad that way, but there was a multi-billion-dollar technology company that my creative director and I had the privilege of traveling to Prague and the UK and another part of the US, and they were foreign owned, and these people were just rude. I mean, we busted our backsides for these people. It was a big project, that was just. I think that was the one time in 23 years where I experienced rudeness. So yeah, that was sad for them, not for us, because we laugh about it at this point. If I told you the story, you'd pee your pants. We don't have enough time, but yeah, these people were just rude.
Well, that's a pretty good track record. If in 23 years, that's what you have. So that's really, really awesome. So what does Bulldog Drummond look like today? Like, what's the makeup of the business? What kind of clients are you working with?
So we went through repositioning, re-examining the role we play in the world about 18 months ago. And especially with climate and the social issues that are affecting the world, we said, how can we make a difference? And our sort of position as a company is we get up every day to try to help leaders become a force for good inside of their organization. So we believe, like many people today, that businesses, companies, leaders in companies are the biggest change agents in society. We have, the ability to move culture. We have the ability to move systems and not necessarily have to rely on government. Another conversation. But so Bulldog, we work with the C-suite executives across a large range of significant companies. So what we look like today is a company that our expertise is in brand, and brand into innovation and people and culture, into customer experience, into social impact and sustainability. They're the practice areas that we operate in. And we are part of a 3-group studio today that has offices in Irvine and Chicago. And we joined forces about 3 years ago. And so as a consulting studio, we now have partners in digital transformation, digital innovation, digital products and commerce. And so we have the ability to sort of affect the entire customer experience, or the connected customer experience, if needed. But what's at our heart is actually moving the world forward through the work that we do, making the world a better place through the work we do.
Yeah. And so what's your biggest challenge right now with that?
I think that the move and the speed at which digital transformation is affecting some businesses, I don't see that as a challenge. I see that as the natural next step for where business is going. I think the challenge that we have is helping companies be aware of what's around the corner while they're dealing with the current reality of pandemic, the current reality of remote working and such.
Yeah, and has the pandemic had a big impact on your business?
We've been very fortunate. I would say we have a sort of a diverse client portfolio. We have, organizations that are in technology and food and beverage, in healthcare. We had clients that were very active in hospitality. So we, I think like the rest of the world, we had a shock to the system in March and early April, and since have been extremely, busy and engaged across a wide range of categories.
Yeah. So what are you most excited about right now, or looking forward to? Maybe would be an even better question.
I think when a dear friend of mine who is a comedian, he posted something today, and it was a picture of this woman in the 20s, and she was in her 20s getup. It's a black and white photograph, and he said, "Remember, when this was over, the roaring 20s happened, and joy is just around the corner." And so I think what I'm excited by is much like, back in the early 90s, and I think about San Diego then and today, the unleashed creativity that is, and the natural joy that is going to come out of humans when we conquer this restriction that is around us today. I don't think we're ever going to go back to the way it was, but there will be a new normal, and the new normal has happened like throughout history. So what happens as a result, the connectivity and the joy, the humor, the music, the art, the culture that is going to come in the next 2, 3, 4 years is going to be fantastic to participate in and experience.
So Shawn, as you think about yourself back in London as young 8-year-old boy, helping your dad open up those farmers markets and getting up early at 4 a.m., or maybe you were a little older than that. Like if he saw you today, what do you think he'd say?
He would say, life is short, make sure you're enjoying, the here and now and not always thinking about tomorrow. I think he'd say, you did all right. And, I think he always had these sort of anecdotes. You can never put a young head on old shoulders, or an old head on young shoulders. But, I think he would say, just make sure you enjoy every day. He would say, be brilliant.
And that is Shawn Parr of Bulldog Drummond. I hope you really heard Shawn's call. That business, that design is the platform for change. That we can design our way over, around, and through some of our biggest social and cultural issues. Think about that for a moment. There is a way forward. It's not easy. It's not obvious, but with some curiosity and intent, design is the tool that furthers our purpose. A big thank you to Shawn Parr of Bulldog Drummond. After our interview, Shawn shared a story of how he was looking at an old picture of a young woman from the 20s dressed in her flapper outfit. And then it reminded him that those roaring times came after a really dark and tough time. And that on the other side of our time will be our version of the 20s, where creativity and innovation will bloom. Soon we'll turn the corner and we'll all be wearing our roaring 20s flapper outfits. We will link to all things Shawn and Bulldog Drummond in the show notes. And if you know of a guest who should appear on our show, please drop me a line at podcast@wildstory.com. Our best guests, like Shawn, come from referrals from past guests and our listeners. Well, that's the show. Until next time. Make sure to visit our website, www.wildstory.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode. I like big stories and I cannot lie. You other storytellers can't deny.